Have you ever felt truly powerless? Picture this. You're singled out, accused, and publicly humiliated in front of hundreds of strangers. You try to explain, but your voice is drowned out by procedure and prejudice. This was the nightmare that 18-year-old Serena Washington lived when she was physically dragged off a flight, her dignity stripped away in a sea of judging eyes. The flight crew, the security, the woman who started it all. They thought she was just another faceless passenger they could dispose of. But they made one colossal mistake. They picked on the wrong person, and they had absolutely no idea that the phone call she was about to make would bring their entire world crashing down. The recycled air of the Boeing 777 hummed with the familiar drone of a cross-country flight, preparing for departure. John F. Kennedy International Airport was a chaotic symphony of hurried announcements and rolling luggage. But for Serena Washington, seat 14A was a pocket of tranquility. She was on her way to Los Angeles for a prestigious summer internship at a top architectural firm, a dream she had meticulously sketched into reality. With her sketchbook open on her lap and noise-cancelling headphones over her ears, the world outside her window seat was a muted blur. Serena was a study in quiet confidence. At 18, she carried herself with an artist's observance, her eyes taking in the lines and angles of the world. She had chosen the window seat, deliberately hoping to watch the urban grid of New York dissolve into the patchwork quilt of America below. The boarding process was nearing its end when a woman likely in her late 40s stopped in the aisle, her sharp gaze fixed on the seat next to Serena 14B. She was impeccably dressed in a tailored blazer and expensive-looking loafers. Her name, as the flight attendant would later address her, was Caroline Preston. "Excuse me," Caroline said, her voice tight and clipped loud enough to cut through Serena's music. Serena slid her headphones off. "Is this seat taken?" Serena glanced at the empty middle seat, 14B, and then to the aisle seat 14C, which was also vacant for the moment. "I don't believe so," she answered politely. Caroline Preston sighed a theatrical expression of annoyance. "Well, my ticket is for 17C, but I saw this entire row was empty. I need to work." She didn't ask. She informed. She began aggressively, shoving an oversized leather tote bag into the overhead bin, bumping another passenger's smaller bag with force. Serena shifted slightly, turning her body towards the window to give the woman space. Caroline settled into 14B, immediately claiming the shared armrest with a proprietary slam of her elbow. She pulled out a laptop and opened it with a series of loud, percussive clicks. A few minutes later, a young man, a college student by the looks of his backpack, arrived with a boarding pass for 14C. He smiled apologetically as he squeezed past Caroline to get to his seat. "Great," Caroline muttered under her breath, just loud enough for Serena to hear. "Just my luck." The microaggressions began subtly. Caroline sighed dramatically every time Serena shifted to get more comfortable. When Serena took out a water bottle from her backpack, Caroline flinched, as if she were brandishing a weapon. The tension in the small space was palpable, a thick, uncomfortable blanket woven from Caroline's unspoken hostility. Serena tried to ignore it, focusing on her sketchbook. She was drawing the wing of the plane, capturing the elegant curve of the metal. Art was her escape, a place where she could control the lines and create harmony from chaos. The final boarding call was announced. As the cabin door was about to be closed, a flight attendant named Brenda, a woman with a weary expression and hair pulled back in a severe bun, walked down the aisle doing a final check. Caroline flagged her down with an imperious wave. "Excuse me, flight attendant." Brenda stopped, her professional smile looking strained. "Yes, ma'am. How can I help? I just feel incredibly unsafe next to this person," Caroline said, gesturing vaguely towards Serena without making eye contact with her. Serena's head snapped up, her heart suddenly pounding. Unsafe. She hadn't said a single word to the woman. Brenda's eyes flickered towards Serena. It was a quick, dismissive glance, but in it, Serena saw a flicker of shared prejudice, a weary acceptance of Caroline's complaint. Unsafe in what way, Ma'am Brenda asked, her tone already shifting to one of placating concern for Caroline. Her bag, Caroline said, pointing to Serena's simple canvas backpack, tucked neatly under the seat in front of her. It's bulky. And she was agitated when I sat down. Very hostile. Serena's mouth fell open. Hostile, I haven't said anything to you. Her voice was steady, but a cold dread was beginning to creep up her spine. She had seen videos of situations like this, but had never imagined herself in the center of one. See, Caroline stage whispered to Brenda, leaning in conspiratorially. The aggression. I was just asking a question, and now she's getting loud. I have a very important meeting in LA, and I will not be harassed on this flight. The young man in 14C looked deeply uncomfortable, sinking into his seat and pretending to be absorbed in the safety card. His silence was a deafening vote for non-involvement. Brenda's professional mask hardened. She turned her full attention to Serena, her eyes no longer accommodating, but accusatory. Ma'am, is there a problem here? There isn't one, Serena said, her voice laced with disbelief. This woman sat down and has been acting strangely, and now she's making things up. I was just sitting here drawing. She held up her sketchbook as evidence of her tranquility. Brenda ignored the sketchbook. Ma'am, we need to ensure the comfort and safety of all our passengers. I'm going to have to ask you to please remain calm. The word calm was like a spark on dry tinder. I am calm, Serena insisted, her voice rising slightly despite her best efforts. I'm being accused of something I didn't do. Caroline seized the opportunity. Oh my God, she's raising her voice at me. She's threatening me. Flight attendant, you have to do something. She physically recoiled, pressing herself against the seat, as if Serena were about to strike her. It was a masterful performance, and Brenda was its captive audience. The lead flight attendant's face was now a grim, determined mask. The initial seed of a minor complaint had been watered with prejudice and was now blossoming into a full-blown security issue in her mind. That's it, Brenda said, her voice cold and official. I'm calling the gate agent. We don't tolerate this kind of behavior on Aura Airlines. Serena stared at her, utterly stunned. Aura Airlines. Her father's airline. The company he had built from a single leased plane into a global carrier founded on the principle of unparalleled customer respect. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. She watched as Brenda marched toward the front of the plane, leaving Serena in the silent, judgmental vortex Caroline Preston had so expertly created. The hum of the cabin seemed to fade into a dull roar in Serena's ears. Every eye in the surrounding rows was now on her. She saw a mixture of curiosity, annoyance, and suspicion in their faces. The young man in 14C had his phone out, discreetly recording his face, a mask of nervous fascination. Serena felt a hot flush of shame and anger creep up her neck. She was the victim, yet she was being painted as the aggressor. A few minutes later, Brenda returned, flanked by a stern-looking gate agent named Mark. His ID badge was clipped to a lanyard that swung with his determined stride. He stopped at their row, deliberately avoiding Serena's gaze and speaking directly to Brenda. Brenda, what's the situation, unruly passenger? Mark Brenda reported, her voice filled with self-righteous gravity. Harassing Ms. Preston in 14B became verbally aggressive when I intervened. She's a security risk. The term security risk hung in the air, a poisonous accusation. Serena felt her breath catch in her throat. This was escalating at a speed she couldn't comprehend. Mark finally turned his cold, procedural gaze on Serena. "Mum, I'm going to need you to gather your belongings and come with me." "Come with you?" where Serena asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I haven't done anything wrong. This woman," she gestured to Caroline, "is lying. Can't you just ask the person in 14C? He saw the whole thing." All heads turned to the young man, who immediately looked down at his lap, his face pale. He muttered, "I don't want to get involved. I didn't really see anything." His cowardice was a physical blow. Serena felt utterly alone. Caroline Preston, meanwhile, wore a look of vindicated triumph. She had successfully isolated her target. "Ma'am, we're not going to debate this in the aisle," Mark said firmly. "The flight is already delayed. Get your bag. Now." Serena's mind raced. She knew her rights. She knew this was wrong. But she also saw the unyielding expressions on their faces. They had already passed judgment. Arguing further would only make her look more unruly, just as they wanted. With a heavy heart, she slowly reached down for her backpack. As she did, her phone, which was in her lap, slipped and fell to the floor. She reached down to pick it up, and in that moment, Caroline Preston gasped dramatically. "She's on her phone. She was recording me. She's probably texting someone to cause trouble." It was a patently absurd, desperate lie, but it was all the fuel Brenda and Mark needed. "That's a federal offense," Brenda declared, her voice ringing with authority she didn't truly possess. "You cannot film crew or other passengers without consent during a security-sensitive phase of flight." "I wasn't filming anyone." "My phone fell," Serena protested, holding up the locked screen of her phone. "Look, but they weren't interested in the truth. They were building their case, brick by fabricated brick." Mark spoke into his radio, his voice low but urgent. "We have a non-compliant passenger seat, 14A, potentially filming. Need Port Authority assistance at gate B42. The situation had now spiraled into a waking nightmare. Port Authority, police, all because a woman wanted an armrest, and Serena was an easy target for her prejudice. 2 uniformed Port Authority officers appeared at the cabin door moments later. They were large men, their presence immediately filling the narrow aisle and casting a pall over the entire cabin. Passengers were now openly filming their phones held up like spectators at a Roman circus. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on Serena, stealing her breath. One of the officers, a man with a graying mustache and a world-weary face, addressed her. "Miss, you've been asked to deplane. Are you going to cooperate?" "I will cooperate," Serena said, her voice surprisingly steady. She had to hold on to her dignity. It was the only thing she had left. "But I want it on record that I am doing so under protest. I have been falsely accused and harassed. You can file a complaint at the gate," the officer said dismissively. It was a line he'd probably used 1,000 times. Serena stood up, her movements slow and deliberate. She pulled her backpack on her sketchbook, feeling like a lead weight inside. As she stepped into the aisle, she made eye contact with Caroline Preston one last time. The woman gave her a small, smug smile, a look of pure, unadulterated victory. It was a look that said, "I can erase you, and no one will stop me." Brenda, the flight attendant, stood near the galley, arms crossed, watching the spectacle she had orchestrated with a look of grim satisfaction. As Serena passed, Brenda said, "Have a nice day." The sarcasm was a final, petty twist of the knife. The walk down the aisle was the longest of Serena's life. Every face was turned towards her, a gallery of silent judges. She kept her chin high, her gaze fixed on the open cabin door, a portal from one nightmare into another. As she stepped onto the jet bridge, the door of the 777 hissed shut behind her. The sound was one of finality, of exile. She was alone on the jet bridge with 2 police officers, her dream trip to LA in tatters, her character assassinated, all for reasons she couldn't and wouldn't accept. The jet bridge felt like a sterile purgatory, the sounds of the bustling terminal muffled and distant. The 2 Port Authority officers flanked Serena, their presence a constant oppressive reminder of her new status as a security risk. One of them, the younger of the 2, spoke into his radio, his voice a flat monotone that belied the drama of the situation. "Subject is secure, deplaned without incident. We're bringing her to the gate supervisor's station." Subject. The word stripped her of her name, her identity. She was no longer Serena Washington, aspiring architect. She was a problem to be managed. They led her back into the terminal, where the noise and chaos of Gate B42 hit her with full force. Passengers waiting for other flights stared as she was escorted, their curiosity piqued by the police presence. The gate area for her flight was a scene of controlled chaos. Mark, the gate agent, was busy at the podium trying to placate the other passengers from Flight 1128, who were now officially delayed. He refused to even look at her. The older officer pointed to a row of hard plastic chairs against a wall. "Sit here. A supervisor from the airline will be here to speak with you." Serena sat, her body rigid, with a mixture of shock and incandescent rage. She watched as the ground crew pushed the jet bridge away from the aircraft. The engines of the Boeing 737 spooled up with a deafening whine. Her flight, her internship, her dream. It was all pulling away from the gate, without her, leaving her stranded in a fluorescent-lit hell of corporate procedure and casual cruelty. Tears of frustration pricked at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Her mind was a whirlwind. How could this happen? How could a simple flight devolve into such a public shaming, based on the lies of one malicious woman and the willful ignorance of the crew? They didn't see a person. They saw a stereotype. They saw an aggressive black woman, a trope so tired and toxic that it could be weaponized by a whisper from someone like Caroline Preston. Brenda, the flight attendant, had followed procedure, but she had done so without a shred of critical thought or human decency. Mark, the gate agent, had seen only a problem delaying his departure time, and the captain, the ultimate authority on the aircraft. Captain Miller had remained invisible, a ghost in the machine, who had likely signed off on her removal, based on a 15-second second-hand report from his lead flight attendant. They were all cogs in a system that had chewed her up and spit her out. A woman in an Aura Airlines supervisor uniform, whose name tag read Cynthia, approached her. She held a clipboard and had the same weary, detached expression as the others. She looked at Serena, not as a person who had just been deeply wronged, but as a piece of paperwork to be processed. "Serena Washington?" Cynthia asked, her tone flat. "Yes," Serena replied, her voice tight. "I understand there was a disturbance on the aircraft," Cynthia began reciting from a script Serena was sure she'd used countless times. "Due to the crew's report on your disruptive behavior, the captain has made the final decision to deny you passage. Our policy on unruly passengers is very clear. You have been removed from Flight 1128. The injustice of it all was breathtaking. Disruptive behavior, I was the one being harassed. Your flight attendant refused to listen to me. She took the word of a woman who was lying, and you are all just accepting it." Cynthia's eyes glazed over. She was not there to listen or investigate. She was there to inform. According to the official report filed by the lead flight attendant, you were verbally aggressive and refused to comply with crew instructions. That's not true. That is a complete fabrication. Serena insisted, her voice rising. She caught herself forcing her tone back down. They wanted her to be hysterical. She wouldn't play their game. I want to file a formal complaint. I want the names of the flight attendant and the woman who accused me. You can file a complaint through our corporate customer service website, Cynthia said, pointing to a generic brochure on a nearby table. Your checked luggage will be removed from the flight, and you can retrieve it at the baggage claim office in an hour. As for your ticket, because you were removed for cause it is non-refundable. You will have to make your own arrangements for onward travel. And there it was, the final, brutal dismissal. They had not only humiliated her, they were now charging her for the privilege. Stranded, falsely accused, and out hundreds of dollars. The system was designed not just to fail her, but to punish her for its own failings. Serena looked past the supervisor through the massive plate glass windows of the terminal. The 747, her flight, was taxiing towards the runway. She watched its lights blink as it joined the queue of other planes, a metallic leviathan, indifferent to the small human drama it had left in its wake. In that moment, something inside her shifted. The shock and the hurt began to crystallize into something harder, something colder. A steely resolve. They thought this was over. They thought they had won. They thought she was just another girl with no voice, no power, no recourse. They were about to find out how wrong they were. She reached into her backpack and pulled out her phone. Her hands were trembling, but her purpose was firm. She scrolled through her contacts, past friends and college numbers, until she found the one she needed. It was a direct line, one that bypassed assistants and secretaries. It was the number she used for emergencies. And this, she realized, was an emergency of a different kind. She pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice. Then a familiar voice, calm and deep, answered on the other end. "Serena, is everything okay, honey?" Serena took a deep, steadying breath. "Dad," she said, her voice cracking just for a moment before hardening again. "It's me. There was a problem on the flight." There was a pause on the other end. "A problem? What kind of problem? Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she said, watching the 777 turn onto the main runway. "But I'm not on the plane. They kicked me off. Dad, they kicked me off your flight." Robert Washington was in the middle of a quarterly earnings call in the Airline's headquarters in Dallas. The boardroom on the 50th floor offered a panoramic view of the city, but Robert's focus was entirely on the numbers projected on the screen. He was a man who had built an empire on precision data and an almost fanatical devotion to a single principle. Every passenger from the first-class suite to the last row of economy was a guest in his home. It was this ethos that had distinguished Aura from its competitors. His phone, set to vibrate on the polished mahogany table, buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen. Serena. His daughter never called him during market hours unless it was important. A knot of fatherly concern tightened in his stomach. He discreetly muted his conference line. "Serena, is everything okay, honey?" he asked, his voice low and calm. Then came her words, each one landing like a physical blow. "Dad, they kicked me off. Dad, they kicked me off your flight." The world of spreadsheets and profit margins dissolved. In that instant, he was not Robert Washington, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. He was just a father, and his daughter was in trouble. "Stay right where you are," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, but with an undercurrent of steel that could command armies. "Don't talk to anyone else. Tell me exactly what happened. Start from the very beginning." He stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning his back on the confused executives at the table. He listened silent and intense as Serena recounted the entire sordid affair. She told him about Caroline Preston's immediate hostility, the manufactured complaints, Brenda, the flight attendant's escalating prejudice, mark the gate agent's blind adherence to a false report and the final crushing humiliation of being escorted off the plane by police. She told her story with the clarity of an artist painting a vivid picture of every sigh, every smug look, every dismissive word. Robert Washington's face, normally calm and composed, became a thunderous mask. His knuckles were white as he gripped his phone. He had spent 25 years building Aura's reputation. He had personally written the company's code of conduct, a document known internally as the Aura Way, which emphasized empathy, de-escalation, and respect above all else. What Serena was describing was not just a customer service failure. It was a betrayal of everything he stood for. And it had happened to his own child. "What is the flight number?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Aura flight, 1128, JFK to LAX," and the name of the flight attendant, Brenda. "I didn't get her last name. The gate agent was Mark." "Okay, Serena." Robert's voice was now calm, but it was the calm at the eye of a hurricane. "I'm handling this. I want you to go to the Aura First Class Lounge. Give them your name. They will be expecting you. A car will be sent to take you home. We'll get you on the first flight to LA tomorrow morning. I am so sorry this happened to you. Dad, it's not your fault. It happened on my airline in a plane, with my name on the side of it." He cut in his voice raw. "That makes it my fault, and I will fix it." He ended the call and stood for a moment, looking out at the Dallas skyline, but seeing nothing. The father in him wanted to fly to New York and wrap his daughter in his arms. The CEO knew what he had to do first. Justice had to be swift, decisive, and absolute. He strode back to the boardroom table. The executives fell silent. "Janet," he said to his chief operating officer, Janet Riley, "get me the head of JFK operations on a secure line." "Now," he turned to his chief legal counsel. "David, get a team ready. I want a full-scale internal investigation launched into an incident on Flight 1128, effective immediately." Then he unmuted his conference line, interrupting a nervous analyst mid-sentence. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize. A critical operational matter has just come to my attention. We are postponing this call." He disconnected before anyone could object. Within 60 seconds, he had Frank Miller, the JFK station chief, on the line. Frank Robert Washington. "What the hell is going on with Flight 1128? Frank, a veteran of the airline industry, was audibly flustered. "Mr. Washington." "Sir." Just a standard delay. We had to deplane an unruly passenger, but they're pushing back from the gate now." "Who was the passenger?" "Frank A. Serena Washington, sir. Seat 14A. There was a heavy silence. Frank's blood ran cold. He knew the CEO's last name. He had just never put the two together. Frank Robert said, his voice so cold it could have cracked glass. "That plane does not take off. Turn it around. I want it back at the gate. I don't care if it's on the runway. I don't care if it's third in line for departure. You call the tower and you tell them that Aura 1128 is returning to the gate due to a security misjudgment. Use those exact words. And if that pilot argues, you tell him the order is coming directly from me." "Sir, the delay, the cost," Frank stammered. Frank Robert interrupted his voice, leaving no room for negotiation. "The cost of what happened in that cabin is already far greater than a tank of jet fuel. Get that plane back to the gate. I'm on my way." He hung up. He turned to Janet. "Get the company jet ready. File a flight plan for JFK. I'm leaving in 15 minutes. As he walked out of the boardroom, his phone rang again. It was an unfamiliar number. He answered it. "Is this Mr. Robert Washington?" a man's voice asked. "Who is this?" "My name is Arthur Davies. I was a passenger in seat 15C on flight 1128. I'm still on the plane. I witnessed the entire incident involving the young woman in 14A. It was a disgrace. I have the entire thing on video. I got your number from a contact at Goldman Sachs. I thought you might want to see it before your crew's version of the story becomes official record." Robert stopped in his tracks. A witness, a video, the final piece of irrefutable proof. Mr. Davies Robert said, a grim sense of certainty settling over him. "Send me that video. You have no idea how important your call is." The gears of the massive corporation were now turning not to protect itself, but to enact the will of its founder. For the crew of Flight 1128, and for Caroline Preston, who was at that moment smugly sipping a ginger ale and anticipating an on-time arrival, the world was about to change irrevocably. The phone call was over, but the reckoning had just begun. Aboard Flight 1128, the passengers let out a collective, frustrated groan. They had been sitting on the tarmac, fourth in line for takeoff, when the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Folks, this is Captain Miller from the flight deck. We seem to have a slight operational issue. Air traffic control has instructed us to return to the gate. We apologize for the inconvenience, and we'll have more information for you once we're back at the terminal." The cabin erupted in a cacophony of complaints. "Are you kidding me? What kind of operational issue? This is because of that girl, isn't it?" Caroline Preston in seat 14B felt a prickle of annoyance, but no real concern. Delays were common. She adjusted her neck pillow and decided to use the time to get a head start on her work. She was a senior partner at a high-powered consulting firm, Clayton & Finch, and her sense of self-importance was as vast as the runway outside. The incident with the girl was already a forgotten annoyance, a minor bit of unpleasantness she had efficiently dealt with. Up in the cockpit, Captain Miller was furious. He was a 30-year veteran, a man who saw his job as flying a plane from point A to point B with minimal fuss. He didn't like drama, and he didn't like being told what to do by ground staff. "What do you mean? Security misjudgment," he had barked at the JFK station chief over the radio. My lead attendant reported an unruly passenger. We followed protocol, and she was removed. End of story. We are cleared for takeoff. Negative Captain Frank's strained voice came back. "The order is not from me. The order is from Dallas. From the top. Get the plane back to gate B42. Now." The words from the top sent a chill through the cockpit. In airline parlance, that meant one person, Robert Washington. Captain Miller knew the legends about the founder. He was a hands-on owner who would occasionally show up unannounced for a pre-flight check. To have him personally intervene in a passenger removal was unheard of. Something was very, very wrong. As the 777 made the slow, ignominious journey back to the gate, Brenda, the flight attendant, was in the galley complaining to another crew member. "I swear it gets worse every year. The entitlement. You try to maintain order, and they act like you're the criminal." Good riddance to her. Her colleague nodded in agreement, but there was a nervous energy in the cabin. The official explanation didn't make sense. You don't turn a plane around on the runway for an operational issue you didn't have 5 minutes ago. Meanwhile, in Dallas, Robert Washington was watching the video sent by Arthur Davies. He watched it 3 times in the back of his town car as it sped towards the private airfield. The video was damning. It showed Serena calm and quiet, drawing in her sketchbook. It showed Caroline Preston's aggressive body language, her theatrical sighs. It captured the audio of Caroline's initial complaint to Brenda, her voice dripping with condescension. Most importantly, it showed Serena's reaction, not aggression, but confused, quiet shock. It showed her trying to explain her voice, steady and reasonable, only to be spoken over and repeatedly told to calm down by a flight attendant who had already made up her mind. The video was the truth, unvarnished and irrefutable. It was a textbook case of implicit bias leading to a catastrophic failure of judgment. By the time Robert's private jet was ascending over Texas, a high-level team from Aura's corporate office was already converging at JFK. The head of in-flight services, the vice president of airport operations, and a team of corporate security and HR investigators had been scrambled. They had one directive: secure all reports, logbooks and personnel files related to Flight 1128 and await Mr. Washington's arrival. When Flight 1128 finally reconnected to the jet bridge at Gate B42, the passengers were told to remain seated. The cabin door opened, but instead of departing, passengers, a grim-faced Frank Miller, the station chief, stepped aboard. He was followed by 2 members of Aura's corporate security team. Frank walked directly to the galley. "Brenda, Captain Miller wants to see you in the cockpit. Now." Brenda's smug confidence began to falter. This was not standard procedure. She walked to the front, her steps suddenly less certain. Inside the cockpit, Frank didn't mince words. "What happened here today? Captain Miller was defensive. My crew followed de-escalation protocol for an unruly passenger." "That's not what I'm hearing," Frank cut him off. "I'm hearing that a paying customer was harassed, lied about, and forcibly removed from this aircraft without a shred of evidence or due process. And I have just been informed that our CEO is on his way here from Dallas because of it." Captain Miller's face went white. Brenda, standing behind him, felt a wave of nausea. This. The puzzle pieces were clicking into place with horrifying speed. Washington, Serena Washington. They had just ejected the daughter of the man who owned the entire airline. Down in the cabin, the passengers were getting restless. Arthur Davies, the man who had recorded the video, sat calmly watching the drama unfold. He knew he had thrown a grenade into the situation, and he was waiting to see the fallout. Caroline Preston was now deeply annoyed. She flagged down another flight attendant. "What is going on? I demand to know why we are being held here. I have a meeting with the board of Northrop Grumman in 4 hours." The flight attendant, a young woman who had just been briefed on the severity of the situation, looked at Carolyn with undisguised contempt. "Ma'am, you will need to remain seated. We are experiencing a personnel-related delay." As the minutes stretched into an hour, the atmosphere on the plane curdled from frustration to dread. The crew knew something terrible was coming. The passengers knew they were caught in the middle of it. And in seat 14B, Caroline Preston was slowly beginning to realize that the small, satisfying victory she had won earlier might come at an unimaginable cost. She had poked a hornet's nest, never imagining it was owned by a lion. 2 hours later, Robert Washington walked through the terminal at JFK. He didn't storm or shout. His arrival was quiet, almost unnervingly so. He wore a simple dark suit, but he moved with an aura of absolute authority that made people instinctively step out of his way. He was flanked by Janet Riley, his COO, and David Chen, his chief legal counsel. They didn't go to a conference room. Robert led them directly onto the now-empty jet bridge of Gate B42, which was still connected to the silent Boeing 777. The passengers had been deplaned and sent to a private lounge, with apologies and meal vouchers, all except for 2 Arthur Davies, who had been asked to remain as a witness, and Caroline Preston, who had been curtly informed by corporate security that she was required to stay for an investigation. Inside the first-class galley of the plane, a makeshift tribunal had been arranged. Captain Miller, lead flight attendant, Brenda, and gate agent Mark stood awkwardly, their faces pale and drawn. They looked less like airline professionals and more like defendants awaiting sentencing. Robert Washington entered first, his eyes sweeping over the 3 of them. The air grew thick with tension. He didn't sit. He stood, his gaze as cold and hard as granite. "I have founded and run this company for 25 years, he began, his voice low and controlled, yet every word carried immense weight. In all that time, I have never been so profoundly ashamed of the name on the side of my aircraft. He paused, letting the silence amplify his words. I'm going to ask you one question at a time. I expect nothing but the complete and unvarnished truth. The time for curated reports and corporate jargon is over. Let's start with you, Brenda. He turned his full attention to her. Tell me about the unruly and aggressive passenger in seat 14A. Brenda swallowed hard, her rehearsed confidence completely gone. So the passenger in 14B, Ms. Preston, she felt threatened. She said the other passenger was hostile. I was following procedure. Which procedure? Robert cut her off, his voice sharp. Was it procedure 7.4, which outlines de-escalation through active listening? Or was it procedure 9.2, which requires seeking corroboration before taking drastic action? Because I've reviewed your report and I've seen a video of the incident, it seems the only procedure you followed was one of immediate escalation based on the word of a single, clearly agitated passenger. He held up a tablet and played Arthur Davies's video without sound. They watched the silent movie of the encounter, Serena's calm demeanor, Caroline's overt hostility, Brenda's immediate siding with the accuser. Look at her, Robert said, pointing to Serena's image on the screen. Does that look like an aggressive young woman to you? Or does it look like a quiet girl trying to enjoy her flight before being targeted and railroaded by my crew? Brenda's face crumpled. I made a judgment call, sir. You made a prejudiced call, Robert corrected her, his voice devoid of heat but full of crushing finality. You saw what you expected to see, not what was actually there. You failed as a flight attendant, and you failed as a human being. He then turned to Captain Miller. Captain, you are the ultimate authority on this vessel. Your signature is on the report that branded a young woman a security risk. Did you ever once leave the cockpit to assess the situation for yourself? No, Sir Miller mumbled. I relied on the report from my lead flight attendant. That is standard operating procedure. Is it also standard procedure to not ask a single clarifying question when a passenger is being forcibly removed from your flight? You held the power to ruin a person's day, to strand them, to put them on a no-fly list. With that power comes the responsibility of due diligence, a responsibility you abdicated from the comfort of your chair. Captain Miller had no answer. He stared at his shoes, the 4 gold stripes on his epaulets, suddenly looking like a badge of shame. Finally, Robert addressed Mark, the gate agent. And you were the last line of defense on the ground. You had the chance to speak with her, to listen. You chose to threaten and dismiss. You were more concerned with an on-time departure than with justice. The 3 of them stood in stunned silence, the full weight of their failure crashing down upon them. You are all suspended, effective immediately pending a formal review, which I suspect will result in your termination. Robert stated his tone, leaving no room for appeal. You will be escorted from the premises. Your careers with Aura Airlines are over. He then turned to his security chief. Please bring Ms. Preston in. Caroline Preston entered the galley, her blazer now slightly rumpled, her composure frayed. She attempted a confident, indignant expression. I'm glad someone with authority is finally here. Your staff's handling of this delay has been abysmal. I have a very important meeting. Robert held up a hand, and she fell silent. Ms. Preston, I am Robert Washington. I own this airline. I have seen a video of your conduct on this flight. I have seen how you systematically harassed and then lied about a fellow passenger. Caroline's face paled. Now wait a minute, she was the one. Enough, Robert's voice was a whip crack. Your behavior was despicable. You weaponized a stereotype to get your way, and in doing so you caused immense distress to a young woman and have cost this company a fortune in delays and damages to its reputation. David, he said, turning to his lawyer. What are our options? David Chen stepped forward. Ms. Preston, you have been identified as the source of a malicious and false report that led to a security action. As such, you will be permanently banned from flying on Aura Airlines or any of our partner carriers for life. Furthermore, given that your actions have directly resulted in significant financial and reputational harm, we are exploring a civil suit against you for damages. We will be in touch with your legal counsel. Caroline stared at him aghast. A lawsuit? You're banning me. This is outrageous. What's outrageous? Robert said, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a low, intense growl. Is that you thought you could treat another human being like that and face no consequences. Consequences are here, Ms. Preston. You wanted a more comfortable seat. Instead, you've earned yourself a lifetime ban and a future of legal bills. Now get off my plane. Defeated and trembling, Caroline. Preston was led away by security. The quiet, methodical destruction of her entitlement was complete. Robert stood for a moment in the silent galley. The immediate threat was neutralized, but the deeper rot remained. This wasn't just about a few bad employees. It was about a culture that had allowed this to happen. The karma had been delivered, but the real work was just beginning. The fallout from the incident on Flight 1128 was not a quiet, internal affair. It became a crucible for Aura Airlines and a public lesson in accountability. Robert Washington was not a man who swept problems under the rug. He put them on display as a catalyst for change. The first ripple was the careers of those involved. As predicted, Captain Miller Brenda and Mark were terminated after a swift but thorough formal review. Their dismissals were logged in a shared industry database, making it nearly impossible for them to be hired in any senior customer-facing role at another major airline. Brenda, who had been 2 years from a full pension retirement, lost it all. She had traded her future for a moment of perceived authority. Captain Miller, a man who once commanded multi-million-dollar aircraft, found himself grounded permanently, a pariah in the aviation community he once held in high regard. The second and much larger ripple was Caroline Preston. Arthur Davies, with the full consent of the Washington family, gave his video to a national news outlet. It went viral overnight. The clip, titled "Consulting Firm Partners Racist Outburst on Aura Airlines," was played on every major network. Her employer, Clayton & Finch, a company that prided itself on its public image of diversity and inclusion, was caught in a firestorm. Their phones rang off the hook. Clients threatened to pull their multi-million-dollar contracts. Within 48 hours, Clayton & Finch issued a public statement. Caroline Preston was fired and her profile was scrubbed from their website. Her very important meeting with Northrop Grumman never happened. Instead, they issued a statement commending Aura Airlines for their swift action. Caroline became a public symbol of entitlement and prejudice. She lost her job, her reputation, and found herself in a legal battle with Aura Airlines, who followed through on their threat to sue for damages. The karma was not a single event. It was a cascade of consequences, dismantling the privileged life she had built, all stemming from her refusal to share an armrest. But Robert Washington knew that punishing the guilty was only half the battle. The true measure of his leadership would be in the changes he implemented to prevent such an incident from ever happening again. He personally flew to Los Angeles the next day to meet Serena, who had finally arrived, and took her to her internship orientation. He listened as she described not just her anger, but her deep disappointment that the company he had built could harbor such a culture. That conversation lit a fire in him. 2 weeks later, Aura Airlines announced a sweeping new company-wide initiative. It was called the Serena Initiative, a return to the Aura way. It was a mandatory top-to-bottom retraining program for all 60,000 Aura employees, from baggage handlers to the board of directors. Developed in partnership with leading sociologists and de-escalation experts, the program focused on identifying and combating implicit bias, active listening techniques, and conflict resolution that prioritized human dignity over rigid procedure. Robert Washington kicked off the first session himself, appearing via video. He told the unvarnished story of what had happened to his own daughter on one of his own planes. He was brutally honest about his company's failure. "We are not judged by our mistakes," he told his employees, "but by how we respond to them. Today, we respond by getting better. We respond by remembering that every ticket has a human being attached to it." Serena, initially reluctant to be the face of the initiative, eventually agreed. She helped design the training modules, providing a passenger's perspective. She became an unlikely but powerful advocate for passenger rights and corporate responsibility. Her architectural internship was a success, but she had discovered a new passion, designing systems that were not just physically sound, but socially just. The story of Flight 1128 became a legend in the airline industry, a cautionary tale about the high cost of prejudice, and a powerful example of corporate accountability. Aura Airlines took a short-term financial hit, but its reputation for integrity soared. Passengers chose to fly Aura because they knew the man at the top wouldn't just promise respect, he would ground his own fleet to guarantee it. The hard karma that hit Brenda Captain Miller and Caroline Preston wasn't just about losing their jobs. It was about the world seeing them for who they truly were. And for Serena and Robert Washington, the horrifying incident became a defining moment that didn't break them, but reforged them, a father and daughter, who turned a moment of profound injustice into a lasting legacy of positive change. That is the incredible story of how one young woman's humiliation became a catalyst for a corporate revolution. It's a powerful reminder that injustice, whether it's at 30,000 feet or on solid ground, thrives in silence. Serena's story could have ended on that lonely jet bridge, another forgotten statistic of casual cruelty. But because of one phone call and a father who valued integrity over profit, it became a story of ultimate karma and profound change. It shows that true power isn't about your title or position, but about your willingness to stand up and do the right thing, no matter the cost. What do you think was the most satisfying moment of justice in this story? Let us know in the comments below. If you believe that accountability matters, and that stories like this need to be heard, please hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and make sure you subscribe to the channel for more true life stories of injustice, karma, and ultimate redemption. Thank you for listening.